Triggers. Even the word makes your brain kind of cringe and go into reactive mode. Now more than ever, we as leaders have got to get mastery over the things that threaten to draw us into reactivity mode. All of the stimulus that we respond to comes in as a neutral event until we assign it an emotional value. And then our thinking is shaped and contextualized from that emotional definition that we give this neutral event. So as leaders, we have got to find a ninja hack, I call it, or a next level ability to become more trigger proof so that we can set an example of what our character and our composure look like under fire, under provocation, and we have a consistent method, a ninja technique, I like to call it, that works for us. So let me share with you a few secrets for how you can become more and more trigger proof, especially in the world today when just it seems like there's an invitation for conflict everywhere. So right off the bat, it's important to realize that we don't see things as they really are. We see things as we are. And so we all have a lens, we have a filter that we personalize things through. And that is the first technique, distance. So each of us have what I call a mental garden, and we have to create a fence line around that. Otherwise, you're just going to have this environment where any invader, any stimulus invader can just come stomping into your mental garden and draw you into reactivity mode. And time and time again, I think we can all agree that when we engage, when we choose to engage in reactivity, we almost always come away with regrets. And in the life of a leader, there is no place for reactivity. Everything needs to be a thoughtful response. So the first technique, distance. What that does is essentially you create a mental picture, because one of the things that can happen when we get pulled into triggering provocative situations is that we are filled with all different kinds of mental pictures that sway our emotions, that then shape our thinking and can take us into a chain of events that we really don't want to happen. So distance is essentially picturing your mental fence around your personal mind garden. And I also like to add to that the idea of that everything that happens to me, whether it's an email or it's a verbal exchange or it's someone's behavior towards me in a meeting, whatever it might be, comes into a waiting room. I don't let it all the way in. It comes into a waiting room where I then observe it. I can objectively put on a new lens and think about it without being triggered by it. Because if I allow it to trigger me, I'm giving that situation, that person, whatever it is, power over me. And I don't do that. I am the person who's going to stay in charge of the reins of influence over my own mind and my own actions. So I like to picture a waiting room where everything that comes in, it's a neutral event until I assign it a value, but I first need to study it. I need to observe it. And that technique of distance, whether it's a mental fence line, in addition, a proverbial waiting room, everything that happens, invite it into your waiting room, but not all the way in until you do the second part, which is diagnose. We often get triggered because of two different soft spots that almost all human beings have. And this is where the center of reactivity is usually hits us first. It's either fear, insecurity, imposter syndrome, or this person that I need to advocate for me doesn't believe in me, whatever it might be. There is a fear inside of us, or an ego. And that ego usually is the voice of entitlement. I deserve more than this. I shouldn't be treated this way. And usually something that's in this triggering situation, as you observe it in that proverbial waiting room, you will diagnose. It's important to, I call, introspection unhooking. So you've been hooked by a situation, you've been triggered, then you create that mental distance. Wait a second, this is a neutral event until I study it in my waiting room. Now let me look and see, how has this personally triggered me? So then go into your diagnostics. It's kind of like a pilot is taught, don't trust what you see, trust your instruments, trust your gauges. What do your gauges tell you? So don't trust your perspective in what you see, because you may very well be distorted by the emotional context that you're giving it and how it is personally affecting you or evoking certain things inside of you that could have really nothing to do with this particular situation, but everything to do with the soft spots inside of you. So look for fear. What is the fear voice inside of this, inside of me? And what is the ego voice? What is the entitlement or the shoulds or the competitive voice inside of you? And recognize those for what they are. And just look at it through a sterile lens. So that's the diagnostic, is create that dashboard of instruments like the pilot, so that you don't, what's called in the flying world, spatial disorientation, which happens to us when we get drawn into a provoking conversation or reaction to something. We go into that fight or flight mode, and then we can interpret incorrectly what's going on around us. So as you look at the diagnostics, what's the fear voice? What's the ego voice? And then place it there and realize, okay, this is normal, this is human, but I am allowing this to personalize the fear, the ego, and I'm going to objectively place that back in the waiting room instead of owning it. Again, remember, all of triggering, all of provocation is an invitation. It's not a requirement that you react. It's a demand on you, and you get to choose responsiveness and not reactivity. There is no place for reactivity in a leader's life. It's too damaging, too dangerous, not only to our brand, but the example that we are setting for those who are looking to us for how do I handle all of these pressures and demands and reactive situations that will come at me. You're going to give them an example of what this looks like. And this gives you the opportunity to do that introspection, unhooking. Okay, I see where it hooked me in my fears. I see where it hooked me in my ego. And now I get to purposefully unhook that and decide, which is the next piece, which is balance. I'm going to balance this. And I love to use it's kind of a mix of balancing a filtering critical thinking process to the emotional fear and ego that's telling you certain things and trying to sway your behavior. The balance piece is where you put it through a critical thinking process. And that's a mix of the distance, because the best way to do that is to say, someone I trust and respect, how would they handle this situation? How would they advise me to him? What would they say right now? So you pull out of you and you put your kind of body jump into someone that you respect, who would not be personally affected like you are. And then it allows you to hear a new voice, hear a higher level response, someone who is at a safer distance from it. And you can also use the best self voice. Okay, if I was in my best state, my best self right now, how would my best self respond? And so these are a couple techniques. These are ninja skills, I call them, because it really is next level. But all leaders need to learn this. How can we become more and more trigger proof when we are surrounded by provocations at every turn? So distance. Keep your mental fence at all time. That doesn't mean that you can always physically distance, but it does mean that you can go inward into a safer place and put that situation, that person, whatever it is, into the waiting room where you can observe it from a healthy, safe, objective distance. And then the second, diagnose. How is this personally hooking me? Find it. Where's the fear voice? Where's the ego voice? And then literally visualize yourself unhooking it like a fish that got caught on the line, and you unhook that out of yourself and decide, I am depersonalizing this. And I assign it an emotional event. It is neutral until I decide. And so by doing that, you put yourself back in responsiveness mode, and you allow yourself space to think, which is the next piece. After you've diagnosed, how have I gotten hooked by this? And then you balance. And balance is find a balancing voice, find a balancing eye. Usually it's that person that you respect, the individual who always stays on the higher road, and the best self voice. If I was looking at this a year from now, 6 months from now, and I had decided I was going to handle that the best way that I could in my best self, how would he or she sound right now? And you can summon that in the moment. So practice these ninja skills and see how you can become more and more trigger proof.